It was just another dull Tuesday morning in downtown Atlanta when he walked in. People barely noticed him at first. He looked like a street wanderer, grizzled grey beard, tattered coat too thick for spring, and an old burlap sack slung over one shoulder like he was Santa Claus 2 months late. The security guard, Jamal, gave him the usual look, not hostile, just cautious. They were used to the occasional lost soul walking into First Colonial Bank looking for warmth or a free cup of coffee. But this man didn't shuffle like the others. He walked with purpose, almost like he owned the marble floors under his boots. The moment he reached the center of the lobby, he stopped, looked around at everyone, tellers, clients, security, and cleared his throat. Loudly. "I am the rightful owner of this bank," he said, deep voice echoing off the polished walls. Everyone froze. A young teller named Keisha stifled a laugh, assuming it was just a crazy old man playing games. The manager, Mr. Raymond Blake, a tight-suited man with a Rolex he couldn't quite afford, came briskly out of his office. His forced smile vanished the moment he got a good look at the man. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Blake said firmly, waving over Jamal. "You're trespassing." The old man chuckled, reached into his sack and pulled out a thick, dusty, leather-bound book. He slammed it on the nearest counter with a heavy thud that startled everyone within earshot. "Before you call the police, I'd suggest you read this." Jamal moved cautiously, hand near his radio, but curious enough to peek at the book. It looked like a ledger, ancient, pages yellowing, thick with handwritten entries. On the front, First Colonial Trust, 1874. Keisha leaned over and blinked. That's the name this bank had 100 years ago. The old man nodded. "My grandfather built this bank, with his bare hands in the ashes of Reconstruction. Every brick, every loan, every deal, it was ours, until they stole it." People started gathering, forgetting their appointments and deposits. There was something about the man, his tone, his eyes. He didn't look senile, he looked betrayed. Mr. Blake scoffed. "That's impossible. First Colonial was founded by Horace Langston and the Carpenter family. Everyone knows that." The old man looked directly at him. "That's the lie you were all fed. But there were 2 partners, Langston and Elijah Boone, my grandfather. The records were altered. You'll see his signature in that book. Look close." Blake opened, the book still half mocking, until his face shifted. Keisha watched his jaw drop. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Elijah Boone," he muttered, reading the name written in ink. Alongside the bank's founding documents, a list of early investments, and shockingly, a deed with his name. The old man continued, voice lower now, almost like confession. "I didn't come here for money. I came here because legacy matters. You erased a family, my family, but I kept the truth. And now the world's going to know." There was silence in the room, heavy. Then Blake did what any cornered corporate man would do. He called the police. But the old man didn't flinch. He just stood there with the ledger open, eyes burning with history, with loss, with defiance. And then, as if on cue, another voice broke through the murmurs. "My grandmother told me about Elijah Boone," said an older black woman who had come in to cash a check. "Said he built the first bank that gave loans to colored folk in the South. I thought it was just a story." The old man turned to her and nodded slowly. "It wasn't. And now, I need help to take it all back." The officers arrived 12 minutes later, sirens low but lights flashing like a warning shot. By that time, a small crowd had gathered outside the bank. Word spreads fast in a town like this, especially when it involves police, a bank, and a black man claiming ownership of something most people assumed he couldn't possibly have a right to. Jamal opened the door for them, though his stance was tense. He'd been in that uniform for 6 years and dealt with plenty of troublemakers, but something about this old man didn't sit right in the usual way. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't threatening anyone. He stood his ground, like someone who knew the truth would carry him, even if nobody else would. One of the officers, Sergeant Lisa Heron, approached calmly. She was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, and not unfamiliar with strange calls like this. "Mister," she asked, hands loose near her belt. "Boone," he said. "Emery Boone, grandson of Elijah Boone." Blake jumped in, flustered. He barged in, claiming to be the owner of the bank, and now he's disturbing the peace. He brought some old book, probably forged, trying to stir trouble. Lisa held up her hand. We'll get to that. She turned back to Emery. You have identification? Saya tumara forten sumaka stita de force. He nodded slowly, reached into the inside pocket of his coat, and handed over a worn leather wallet. Inside was an ID from South Carolina. Everything checked out. And this book? She asked. It's the original ledger of First Colonial Trust. You'll find my grandfather's name inside. He co-founded this bank in 1874, but after his death, the Langstons and Carpenters erased him, took everything, changed the narrative. But this book tells the truth. Lisa took it gently, turning the first few pages. She wasn't a historian, but she could tell age when she saw it. The handwriting, the ink, the seal impressions, it looked authentic. What do you want, Mr. Boone? She asked. I want a formal investigation into the foundation of this institution. I want historical property rights reviewed, and I want this bank to stop lying about who built it. Blake scoffed. We're not a museum. This is a financial institution, and your name isn't on the original deed, Emery interrupted calmly. That shut Blake up, at least for a moment. By now, someone was filming with their phone. The scene was too strange to ignore. The crazy-sounding story was gaining a rhythm, and the look on Blake's face only added to the doubt. Sergeant Heron made a decision. We're not arresting him, she said firmly to Blake. Not unless he threatens someone or refuses to leave when asked. This isn't criminal, it's civil, historical, maybe even legitimate, Blake fumed. Then I want him off the premises. Emery looked her dead in the eyes. You can put me out of the building, but you won't erase what's in that book. Lisa nodded once. Mr. Boone, I suggest we step outside. You and I can talk, and we can contact the Historical Commission. If there's any legitimacy to your claim, they'll know where to go with it. He agreed, picking up the sack, still silent, still slow in movement, but not because he was weak, because he was deliberate. Outside, under the sun, Emery sat on the bench next to the stone steps and watched people walk by. Some stared. Some whispered. A few nodded. One man, a younger white guy in a delivery shirt, paused and said, Hey, I saw your story on Facebook already. That ledger's real? Emery nodded. As real as the lie they built this bank on. Later that afternoon, the footage hit local news. By nightfall, it was picked up by a mid-tier national blog that specialized in uncovering hidden history. The comments exploded. He's probably lying. What if he's not? America's full of stolen black legacies. Why not this too? Where's the proof? Check the book, fools. Within 2 days, a historian named Dr. Monique Andrews reached out. She was a black woman who had spent most of her academic life digging up forgotten black economic structures of the post-Civil War South. I saw the video, she said on the phone. If what you're holding is what I think it is, Mr. Boone, this could change a lot more than just the name of one bank. They met at a diner off Peachtree, quiet and tucked in a corner booth. She examined the book for nearly an hour before looking up, eyes wide, voice hushed. This is real, she whispered. Holy. This ledger is the real deal. Emery just nodded. I've kept it in a safe, wrapped in cloth. My father said to never bring it out until I was ready to fight. I buried 3 kids and lost a wife before I had the strength. Now, I'm the last Boone alive. And I won't die with this truth hidden. Monique leaned forward. This isn't just a bank, Emery. This is precedent. If you can prove the bank took the property through erasure and fraud, we could be talking reparations, lawsuits, public apologies, maybe even restitution. Emery didn't blink. I'm not looking for sympathy. I want justice. And I want the name Boone carved back where it belongs, on the foundation stone of that damn bank. She nodded slowly. Then I'll help. You, but this won't be easy. They're not just going to roll over. He cracked a tired smile. I didn't come expecting mercy. I came to fight. By the end of the week, Emery Boone's name was trending on Twitter. Local news had picked up the story, calling it a disputed historical claim. But national outlets were starting to sniff around. Not because they believed Emery necessarily, but because the idea of an old black man with a sack walking into a bank and claiming to own it was just too damn juicy to ignore. First Colonial Bank, on the other hand, was panicking behind closed doors. Blake, who'd brushed the whole thing off as nonsense just days before, now found himself stuck in meetings with the corporate legal team and a crisis PR firm. The footage of him trying to dismiss Emery had been replayed 1,000 times online. Every sneer, every arrogant gesture now dissected in slow motion with captions like, "The face of denial." This is what theft looks like 100 years later. An emergency email went out to all employees. Do not speak to media. All questions should be forwarded to legal or PR. But it was too late. Inside the bank, whispers were turning into real doubts. Keisha had gone home the day Emery walked in and told her grandma about it, and her grandma, to her shock, remembered the Boones. "I don't know all the history, baby," she said, lighting a cigarette in the kitchen window. "But I remember my daddy saying something about that name. Boone. Said the family used to own land where the bank sits now. Said it got taken." Keisha couldn't stop thinking about it, and she wasn't alone. Employees began quietly researching the bank's history. Some dug up mentions of Elijah Boone in old news articles and black and white photographs that hadn't been digitized. A few records had been redacted, others simply vanished. It all reeked of a cover-up. Meanwhile, Emery and Dr. Monique Andrews were working from a borrowed office space inside a black cultural center downtown. Monique had brought in a small team, law students, a paralegal, and a digital archivist named Jerome, who specialized in property deeds. "What we're building is a timeline," Monique explained to Emery, pointing at a long whiteboard filled with sticky notes, photos, and thread lines like some crime show. "From the founding of the bank to today. If we can show a clear connection between Elijah's ownership and how it was taken, we've got something no PR firm can clean up." Emery watched them work, amazed. For years he'd been alone with the truth. Now people were fighting beside him. Jerome waved them over. "I found something weird," he said, tapping his screen. "Look at this. There's a deed record for the original bank lot, filed under Elijah Boone, 1874. But in 1892, another deed appears. No sale, no transfer document. Just a new owner name, H. Langston." Emery's jaw tightened. "That's when my grandfather died. Suddenly. No sickness. No explanation, just gone." Monique leaned closer. "This isn't a transfer. This is erasure. Someone forged the shift in property." Jerome nodded. "And it gets worse. When the Langston family sold the bank to a corporation in the 1980s, they cited full founding lineage. They never mentioned Boone at all. This was systematic. They had evidence now, real legal weight. But Emery knew what came next, resistance, and he was right. 2 days later, someone broke into the cultural center. They didn't steal cash, they didn't take computers. They took one thing, the original ledger. The one thing that proved Emery's family legacy. The police treated it like petty burglary. No cameras had caught the thief, no fingerprints, just a broken window and an empty table. Monique was livid. This wasn't random. They knew exactly what to take. Emery sat in silence, staring at the broken glass on the floor. Something inside him cracked, but not the way the thief intended. Not fear, not doubt, just cold, angry resolve. "I've still got copies," he said, almost whispering. "I scanned the whole thing. It's on 2 hard drives, one with me, one in a safe deposit box." Monique exhaled in relief. Then, "We're not done." But something else had shifted. The break-in meant they were being watched, maybe followed. And whoever did it wasn't just trying to hide the past. They were warning Emery. Stop digging or else, too bad for them. Boone blood ran deep, and the deeper he dug, the darker things got, because the story didn't end with Elijah Boone. There were rumors, buried in family lore, of a secret clause Elijah had left behind. A clause that stated if ownership was ever proven lost through fraudulent means, the bank's land and assets could legally revert to Boone's bloodline. Monique raised an eyebrow when Emery told her. If that clause exists and it's recognized by the right court, we won't just be making headlines, Emery said. We'll be rewriting the ownership of $1 million institution. 3 days after the break-in, First Colonial Bank filed an official lawsuit against Emery Boone for defamation, fraud, and attempted extortion. The moment the papers hit the press, it was everywhere. News tickers, talk radio, even morning shows. Bank sues man who claimed ownership. Was it all a hoax? The public reaction split straight down the middle. Some people were outraged, calling it retaliation, a cover-up. Others called Emery a liar, accusing him of trying to stir racial division for attention. Emery didn't care much for the noise. He'd lived long enough to know the truth didn't need everyone's approval, just enough people with power to make it count. But Monique was furious. "This is a calculated move," she hissed, slamming the lawsuit packet on the desk. "They're trying to scare you into silence. It's what institutions do when they're guilty." Emery nodded. "Let them come." Monique smirked. "Oh, they're coming, but so are we." What the bank didn't count on was the documentary crew. A producer from an independent studio had contacted Monique the same day the suit dropped. She wanted to document the whole thing, start to finish. Black-owned studio, sharp director, real budget. Emery wasn't sure at first, but when he saw how hungry the young team was to uncover the truth, he agreed. "You understand they'll come after you harder once this goes public," Monique warned him. "They already are," Emery said, "so let the cameras roll." And they did. Within a week, interviews began. Emery, Monique, Keisha, even the old woman from the bank that day. The story wasn't just Emery's anymore. It was a community's. Meanwhile, things at the bank were spiraling. Emails were leaked from inside. Anonymous. Sources. One email, dated 6 months ago, mentioned disposing of old financial archives to eliminate potential claims. Another hinted at paying hush money to a former intern who had stumbled across inconvenient historical documents. That intern, a 22-year-old black woman named Denise, who came forward once the story hit the national stage. "They told me to delete old scanned files," she said on camera, shaking. "But I saw them. One said Boone and Langston Partnership Agreement, 1874. I knew something was off. I saved a copy to my cloud just in case." That one document, unfiltered, unedited, signed by both founders, was a game-changer. Monique brought it to a legal historian at Emory University who authenticated the digital copy and confirmed it matched the style and ink of the period. It was enough to move the case from speculation to litigation. Then came the real bombshell. Jerome, the archivist, traced back the corporate acquisition from the 1980s. He discovered a hidden connection. One of the major shareholders in the current board, Thomas Langston III, the bank's chairman, was the great-grandson of Horace. Langston, the man who allegedly erased Elijah Boone. And it gets worse, Jerome said. Thomas's father, back in 1956, lobbied the state registrar to clean up and simplify old deeds from the Reconstruction era. Several were mysteriously lost during that time, including Boone's. A generational theft, not a mistake, a plan. Emery felt the weight of it all, but he didn't break. He stood in front of every camera, looked the country dead in the eye and said, "I don't want their money. I want the name Boone put back where it belongs. And I want the next black child who walks into that bank to know we were never invisible. We were erased and now we're returning." Protests started small, just a few dozen standing outside the bank with signs. "Boone built this. Where's the deed? They took the land. Now they want his dignity." By the end of the week, the crowd had swelled to over 500. First Colonial tried damage control, released a half-hearted statement. "We acknowledge Mr. Boone's claims and are investigating the historical record. We urge the public to remain calm and respectful as legal proceedings continue." But it was too little, too late. Keisha, now suspended from the bank for allegedly leaking emails, gave an emotional speech at a town hall. "We serve the community, but when we found out we were built on lies, we were told to shut up or get out. I chose to get out." Emery watched her speak, his heart both breaking and swelling with pride. And then, just as things seemed to be tipping in his favor, the threats began. First it was a phone call. No voice, just silence, then a whisper. Stop before you lose everything. Then came a brick through the cultural center's window. This time, no theft, just a message scrawled in red across the floor. You dig up graves, you end up in... 1. Monique was shaken, but Emery wasn't surprised. I've had men spit at my feet, he said, had my name mocked, my history denied, my family's work stolen. I'm not scared of cowards with red paint. Still, she insisted on moving their base of operations. And for the first time, Monique started carrying a small pistol in her purse. Because truth is powerful, but in America, truth is dangerous too. The courtroom was packed, not just with reporters and lawyers, but regular people. Black elders, who remembered hearing the name Boone in stories long buried. Activists, college students. Curious citizens who had never set foot inside a courtroom before, but now came because they felt something real was happening. Emery Boone sat at the plaintiff's table beside Monique, wearing a pressed grey suit that had belonged to his son before he died. It was a little loose around the shoulders, but it held him upright like armor. Monique sat beside him, calm, focused, a legal warrior with fire behind her glasses. Across the aisle, the bank's legal team looked exactly like you'd expect. High-paid, high-powered, and highly annoyed to even be in the same room as a man with a burlap sack and a claim they had called baseless just weeks ago. The judge was a black woman in her early 50s, Judge Clarice Mathers. Sharp, direct, and clearly aware of the case's national attention. She'd made it clear from the start, this court is not a circus. I don't care what the cameras say. I care what the evidence says. Opening statements were brutal. The bank's lawyer, a smug man named Walter Greaves, painted Emery as a nostalgic old man clinging to stories. There is no legal basis, he said, gesturing with polished hands. No verified ownership, no filed claims, no valid inheritance. What Mr. Boone presents is an emotional tale with no legal teeth. Monique stood with no theatrics, just truth. This is not a tale. This is a legacy covered in dust, buried by racism, greed, and generations of erasure. We have documentation. We have property filings, ledger copies, eyewitness history, and most importantly, intentional fraud. You want to talk about legal standing? Let's start with the illegal transfer of deed in 1892. And that was just the beginning. Over. The next 3 days, evidence rolled in like a slow storm. They brought out the scanned ledger authenticated by historians. They showed the original 1874 partnership agreement signed by Elijah Boone and Horace Langston. They highlighted the disappearance of Boone's deed during a government simplification process spearheaded by Langston's descendants. They played the documentary crew's footage, testimony from Denise the intern, and voice recordings of residents who recalled their grandparents' stories of Elijah Boone's bank. The final piece, a recorded confession, uncovered by Jerome just 2 nights before trial. It was an audio tape from 1969, Thomas Langston II, drunkenly reminiscing at a country club, caught on a reel-to-reel recorder. I'll tell you, Daddy. Always said the best move he made was erasing that colored fella. Boone, I think. Took the deed, had a man rewrite the paperwork. Nobody questioned it. Who's going to defend a Negro back then anyway? When the audio played in court, the room went dead silent. Judge Mathers paused the session for 10 minutes, so everyone could collect themselves. Greaves fought hard to get the audio tossed, claiming it was unverified, contextless, and inadmissible, but Judge Mathers allowed it under historical relevance and precedent. His objections were like a matchstick against a wildfire now. Then came Emery's testimony. He stood, no notes, just memory. He told the court about his father dying bitter, clutching the ledger, about growing up with the story no one believed, about living in a country where the color of your skin meant you could be the heir to a kingdom and still be treated like a beggar. They didn't just take a building from us, Emery said, voice steady. They took the future my family built. They made it theirs and erased us. I've buried my sons, my wife, and now I'm the last Boone left. If I walk out of here with nothing but my name restored, that's still a victory. Some in the audience wept quietly. The judge didn't blink, but she listened. The bank's lawyers tried everything after that, dismissal motions, character. Their attacks, attempts to cast doubt on the paper trail. But the truth had taken root, and truth once exposed spreads like fire. Outside the courtroom, things were boiling. Protests had grown bigger. First colonial bank locations across the state were being picketed. Customers were closing accounts in solidarity. A trending hashtag took over Twitter. Frau Boone built this. And then, just when things seemed like they couldn't turn more chaotic, another envelope arrived at Monique's office. No return address. Inside, a notarized copy of the original property, clause Elijah Boone allegedly drafted in 1874. It was real, legally binding. And it included a clause stating, should fraud or misrepresentation result in loss of property, said ownership shall revert to the Boone family upon proof of such. The implications were massive. This isn't just about clearing a name anymore, Monique whispered. Emery, if this holds in court, you may actually own the damn bank. He looked at her, stunned. I never thought I'd live to see justice look me in the face. By the morning of the final day in court, the air felt different, heavier, like the whole town was holding its breath. Emery stood outside the courthouse, eyes closed for a moment, breathing in the cold air. He wasn't praying. He'd stopped doing that after burying his youngest son. He was just remembering. The dirt roads of South Carolina, the stories his father told in a low voice when the lights were out, the way they always whispered the name Boone like it was something holy, but broken. Inside, Monique paced, quietly, reviewing notes one last time. Jerome was already seated, face glued to his phone as the number Boone built. This hashtag climbed even higher, now trending internationally. You're not just a case anymore, Emery, he said. You're a symbol. Emery chuckled, soft and tired. I didn't come to be a symbol, I came for what they stole. But the bank wasn't done fighting. Before the court was gavelled in, Greaves, the bank's lawyer, made a move no one saw coming. We'd like to submit a new witness, he announced smugly, a direct descendant of Elijah Boone, who claims Mr. Emery Boone is not who he says. He is. We believe this will prove our case. The judge blinked. You're challenging Mr. Boone's identity? Greaves nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We believe he fabricated his lineage. This witness has documents. The courtroom buzzed, and then they brought him in. A younger man, maybe mid-40s, light-skinned, slick suit, perfect smile. His name was Daniel Cray, and according to his statement, he was a verified Boone descendant with historical documents proving his connection. I don't know who this man is, Daniel said from the stand, glancing sideways at Emery. But I've studied my family line. I'm the closest living heir of Elijah Boone, not him. It was a knife to the throat. Monique sprang up, demanding time to review the documents. Judge Mathers allowed a short recess. In the hallway, Monique paced like a caged lion, flipping through Daniel's so-called proof. This is professionally forged, she muttered. Someone paid big for this garbage. The dates don't match. The formatting is off. Elijah didn't even sign his name like this. Jerome, skimming a digital copy, agreed. It's fake, but it'll slow things down, delay the ruling, maybe even cast doubt. That was the play. Confuse, stall, discredit. Back in court, Monique returned fire. Your Honor, we submit these documents as forgeries. We have multiple examples of Elijah Boone's real signature, all of which conflict with what the defense has introduced. Furthermore, we have genealogical records, sworn family testimony, and verified lineage for Mr. Emery Boone going back 5 generations. The judge raised her brow. Do you believe this witness was planted to derail the case? Monique didn't flinch. I don't believe it. I know it. Gasps in the room. Judge Mathers called a closed-door evidentiary review. After 2 hours of review with expert testimony, she returned to the bench, her voice sharp and cold. This court finds the testimony and documents of Mr. Daniel Cray to be fraudulent and maliciously submitted. This is an insult to the justice system, and I am placing a formal inquiry into the defense's conduct. Greaves turned ghost white. One of the bank's junior lawyers quietly slipped out the back door, sensing the ship was sinking. With the distraction crushed, the final phase of the trial began. Judge Mathers reviewed the ledger, the the partnership agreement, the missing deed, the historical clause. Then, in a move no one expected, she called Emery back to the stand for one last question. "Mr. Boone," she said, her voice calm, "if the court rules in your favor, if we recognize that you are the rightful heir to Elijah Boone's claim, and that fraud occurred, what do you intend to do with this bank?" The room went silent. Emery paused, then said plainly, "I'll reclaim it, every brick, every floor, but not to run it like they did. I'll turn it into something new, a credit union, community-owned, and the first loan we give out will go to a young black mother trying to build something her kids can inherit. That's what this should have always been about. Legacy." There was no applause, just tears, just stillness. The next morning, the judge delivered her verdict. In the matter of Emery Boone versus First Colonial Bank, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Gasps. "Some sobs," she continued, "based on overwhelming documentary evidence, corroborated witness testimony, authenticated historical records, and a pattern of deliberate concealment by the defendant and its predecessors. It is the opinion of this court that Mr. Emery Boone is the rightful descendant of Elijah Boone, co-founder of First Colonial Trust. Furthermore, this court acknowledges the validity of the 1874 clause, granting Mr. Boone, upon proof of fraud, legal claim to the original, land and physical property." Emery didn't move. He heard every word, but he just sat there, hands folded, jaw tight, eyes wet but not crying, because this wasn't joy. It was justice. And justice, when it finally comes, doesn't scream. It whispers, "Now they know." The bank? They appealed, of course they did. But the damage was done. Monique leaned in and whispered, "We won. And even if they fight it, the world saw the truth." He nodded. "My name's Boone. And now they finally have to say it too." 2 weeks after the verdict, Emery Boone stood in front of the building his grandfather built. Now technically, his. It was early morning, quiet. The rising sun stretched across the granite columns of First Colonial Bank, painting them gold like they were being baptized in truth. There was a new plaque on the door. "Property under legal transition, Boone Legacy Holdings." But that was the clean version. What happened behind the scenes was anything but. The bank had filed an appeal the same day they lost, calling the verdict a historic overreach based on sentiment over statute. Their lawyers spun it to every media outlet that would listen. "This sets a dangerous precedent," they warned. "No institution is safe if we allow emotion to rewrite legal history." But it wasn't emotion that made them panic. It was precedent. If Emery Boone could reclaim a legacy stolen by fraud over 100 years ago, how many others could? That terrified people in power. Within days, Emery started getting emails from strangers. Some sent support. Others sent threats. "Don't think you're a hero. You just stole a business. Watch your back, old man. You'll regret this." They won't let you win twice. Monique, now not just his attorney but his closest confidant, moved more cautiously. "I've seen this before," she told him. "Not just legal backlash, economic sabotage, silent hands trying to choke the life out of you without touching you directly." She was right. Banks began freezing transactions linked to Boone Legacy Holdings, claiming compliance reviews. Suppliers for the planned renovations suddenly pulled out. Emery's insurance quote tripled overnight. The account he opened under his newly acquired credit union title, delayed by unusual activity flags. They couldn't beat him in court, so they turned to the system. Quiet denial, whispered refusals, the invisible wall black men like. Emery had faced their whole lives, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he called a press conference. Under the tall arch of the bank's front steps, surrounded by local media and dozens of supporters from the community, Emery stepped to the mic. He looked tired, yes, but also defiant, like a man who knew fire and learned to carry it. "I stood in court and proved my family was erased from this institution. I won that fight. Now they want to punish me in silence. But I'm still here, and I won't beg to breathe." He lifted a file folder. "This is proof of every delay, every denial, every financial obstacle thrown at me since I won. If they want to build a second wall, they better remember I already tore the first one down." The footage went viral again, and this time, the outrage wasn't just local, it was national. People flooded First Colonial Bank's social media with one word: reparations. Petitions started. Protests flared again. A major black-owned credit union from Chicago offered to help Emery start his own branch. Donations poured in from every corner of the country. Small amounts, large ones, notes from strangers. One woman wrote, "My great-grandfather couldn't get a loan because of your bank. This is for him and for you." But with visibility came more enemies. A local conservative radio host ran a 3-day smear campaign calling Emery a race hustler and opportunist. He accused Monique of being a Marxist pretending to be a lawyer. The story became fuel for politicians looking to stoke fear. "They're coming for your property," one pundit sneered on TV. "Today it's a bank, tomorrow your house." Emery watched it all, unfazed. "I've seen this dance before," he said. "When you speak the truth too loudly, they call it a threat." But it wasn't just the outside noise. Inside, Emery felt something else: exhaustion. He was pushing 80. His knees ached. His memory flickered in and out some days. And the one person he wanted to tell all this to, his son Michael, was long buried. One night, sitting on a crate inside the still-empty bank lobby, he whispered into the dark, "You were right, Mike. They weren't ever going to give us a damn thing." And then his phone buzzed, a message from Monique. Just one line. "They're offering a buyout, $8 million to walk away. Today." He stared at the screen, numb. $8 million. It would change his life. He could move somewhere warm, live easy, build something else, let the bank rot, let them have it. Maybe that's what they wanted all along, to pay him off like a problem. He read the message again. $8 million. He thought of the sack he carried that first day. The ledger. The look on Blake's face. The voice of that woman who said her grandmother remembered Boone. He picked up the phone, typed one word, "No," and hit send. Because legacy doesn't get bought. It gets fought for. A year had passed. 1 full year since Emery Boone walked into First Colonial Bank with nothing but a sack, a ledger, and a truth the world had buried. Now the building had a new name carved into the stone above the door: Boone Trust Credit Union Est. 1874, reclaimed 2024. The old brass sign from First Colonial had been removed and sold at auction. Emery didn't want it hanging in any museum. Let it sit in someone's basement, gathering dust like the lie it was. The bank had lost its appeal. The judge's ruling was upheld at the state level. The Langston descendants went quiet, slipping back into their gated communities, licking wounds they'd carved a century ago. There was no public apology. Of course not. But silence was its own admission. Emery didn't get revenge. He got something better: control. He didn't keep the $8 million. He didn't take a salary. Instead, he built a credit union for the very people Elijah Boone once tried to serve: loans for black business owners, financial literacy classes for young teens, grants for single mothers and returning citizens, even a small scholarship fund named after his son Michael. He staffed the place with locals. Keisha got her job back and now managed the branch. Jerome ran digital systems. Denise, the whistleblowing intern, became their head of archival research. The building was transformed too. What used to be a cold, polished marble lobby was now warm. Wood, sunlight, community art on the walls. A mural of Elijah Boone stood 10 feet tall, painted with shades of struggle and fire. And right beside, him in a brown jacket and a calm stance, was Emery. Same sack, same eyes. No crown, no halo. Just a man who refused to be forgotten. But not everything was easy. The threats hadn't stopped, just gone quieter. The system still resisted him. Zoning boards dragging their feet. Wealthy investors quietly blacklisting his credit union from networks. Whispers in boardrooms, warning other institutions not to follow the Boone model. But it didn't matter, because the people came. The first week, 50 new accounts. By the end of the year, over 12,000, not because it was a better bank, but because it was theirs. One morning, Emery sat in his office, though he never called it that. Just a room with a fan, a worn desk, and 2 chairs. A young man walked in, maybe early 20s, nervous but hopeful. "I'm trying to start a food truck," he said. "They turned me down everywhere else, said I don't have the credit history." Emery looked him over, saw something familiar. Hunger, not for food, for something better. He smiled, stood up slowly, joints groaning, walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a simple form. "We got a program for folks like you," he said, handing it over. "Fill this out. Tell Keisha I sent you." The kid grinned like he'd just been handed the keys to the kingdom. As he left, he turned and asked, "Mr. Boone, why'd you even come back to that bank in the first place? You could have let it go." Emery paused, then smiled to himself, voice low, "Because they thought I'd die quiet." That night, Emery sat alone in the lobby after closing. No lights, just the soft hum of the city outside. He looked up at the mural, his grandfather beside him. Two Boones, two builders. Two men history tried to bury, and he whispered something only the walls could hear. "We're home now, Granddaddy." Outside, someone had lit a candle and placed it on the steps. A note sat next to it, handwritten. "Thank you for fighting. Because of you, I believe we belong in places like this." Emery read it, folded it slowly, and slipped it in his pocket. Then he turned, closed the door behind him, and walked into the night, not as a man who reclaimed a building, but as one who reclaimed a story.